I'd like you to turn to Psalm 37 to begin this morning. Psalm 37. I titled the lesson this morning, Delighting in God. Delighting in God. We talk a lot about the fear of God, and that is good and right, and we need to talk about the fear of God. In fact, next week I'm probably going to do that in the sermon. We talk a lot about the commands of God, and we need to do that. That is good and that is right to do that. We talk sometimes about duty, and that's not a bad word. We have duties as Christians. But sometimes, and maybe too often, our relationship, our walk with God becomes more a walk out of habit. It's sometimes born out of guilt. Sometimes it's born out of fear of punishment. And what I want us to see this morning is that we are missing a lot if that's where we stop in our relationship with God. We need to learn to delight in God. That is a scriptural, biblical concept, and I've found that some of my brethren are afraid of that concept. They're afraid to talk about relationship with God and delight in God, but if we could grasp this, to delight in God, it would change so much about us, it would bless us, it would help us. So I want to look at that this morning. When we talk about delight, of course we're saying something that gives us deep satisfaction. Do you find deep satisfaction in God? When we talk about delight, we're talking about something that gives us great pleasure, that we would find great pleasure in God, that we would cherish God, that if I could put it this way, that we would enjoy God in His presence. And this is throughout the Scriptures, this concept. And we need to learn about it. We need to renew our delight in God if we've lost it. So I want to talk this morning about, well, how do we do that? We'll see how important it is to delight in God, but then how do we regain that fire and that delight and that deepest pleasure in Him? And that's what we'll see this morning. But I want you to see, we're going to go to the Psalms, and it's all throughout the Psalms, delight in God. And we'll just look at a few examples. I want to show you Psalm 37. Look at verse 4. Psalm 37:4. Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust also in Him, and He will do it. Delight yourself in the Lord. I want you to find the greatest and deepest satisfaction in Him. And it's interesting here that he says, if you will delight yourself in the Lord, He will give you the desires of your heart. Isn't that interesting? Because if we're delighting ourselves in the Lord, our heart is molded around Him, and He is shaping our heart. And those desires of our heart that come from that relationship with Him, He says, God will give you the desires of your heart. But delight yourself in Him. Look over at Psalm 94. We're going to flip around just a little bit this morning. Come over to Psalm 94. Look at verse 17. Psalm 94:17. If the Lord had not been my help, my soul would have dwelt in the abode of silence. If I should say, my foot has slipped, your loving kindness, O Lord, will hold me up. Now listen to 19. When my anxious thoughts multiply within me. Have you been there? I know you have. I have too. Our anxious thoughts can multiply within us and well up within us. But what does he say? Your consolations delight my soul. I find pleasure and satisfaction and help and joy in you, God, even when my anxieties are multiplying within me. I find the greatest delight in your consolations. I feel your presence, and I find delight in that, Father. It's so important that we find that in our relationship with God. Turn over to Psalm 42, although you probably don't have to turn to this one because you can sing it. Psalm 42. Go ahead and flip over there. Look at verses 1 and 2. Psalm 42, 1 and 2. As the deer pants for the water, so my soul pants for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When shall I come and appear before God? You know, the word delight is not used here, but you can see the sentiment all over this, can't you? I long for you. As the deer pants for the water, my soul longs after you, God. Because I delight in you. I find the deepest and greatest satisfaction in you and in your beauty and in your holiness and in your power. I delight in you. Just like a deer that would thirst for the water, God, I thirst for you. And we see a similar concept. Let's turn to one more. Psalm chapter 63. That was read earlier. Psalm 63. Verse 1. O God, you are my God. I shall seek you earnestly. My soul thirsts for you. Do you feel that in your life? Have you felt that in your life? Perhaps when you first became a Christian, you felt that. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh yearns for you in a dry and weary land where there is no water. I want you to picture yourself in a desert land and there's no water, and you've been walking and walking all day and there's no water. And you imagine your thirst. And that's all you can think about is quenching your thirst. And you come across a spring, cold and clear and pure, bubbling up. What would that mean to you in that moment? Oh, I delight in that. I'm so thankful. I delight in this spring of pure water. And David is saying here, God, that's how I feel about you. We walk through this land of sorrow and sin and of darkness. And God is this well, this spring that is bubbling up that we can refresh ourselves in. We can find joy in. We can rejoice in. David says, God, you're like that to me. You're like this spring in this dry and weary land where there is no water. He says in verse 2, I have seen you in the sanctuary to see your power and your glory, because your loving kindness is better than life. My lips will praise you. Think about what he's saying there. Lord, your steadfast, strong love towards me, it's greater than life itself. I find delight in you. You're everything to me, Lord, greater than life itself. And so I want us to see here the second bullet point. What are the results? What results from delighting in God? We see that in this chapter. Look again at verse 3. Because your loving kindness is better than life, my lips will praise you. Oh, someone who delights in God. You can't stop them from worshiping God. There is no command, you must worship. There is no guilt trip. There is no arm twisting. Someone who delights in God will say, my lips praise you. They just overflow with praise for God. And you can't stop them from praising God. And you don't have to ask them to praise God, because God is everything to them. And so we see one of the results of delighting in God is heartfelt heartfelt, free-flowing worship of God. Because your loving kindness is better than life, my lips will praise you. Look at verse 4. So I will bless you as long as I live. I will lift up my hands in your name. Heartfelt, free-flowing worship. Not commanded, not forced, not born out of guilt, not born out of the fear of punishment. Worship that's just freely given to God. That's what worship is about. That my heart is so moved and I so delight in Him that you can't stop me from worshiping. You can't stop me from gathering with His people. You can't stop me from pouring out my praise to Him. I will lift up my hands in your name. I will bless you as long as I live. Verse 5, he says it again. The result of a heart that is enamored with God. My soul is satisfied as with marrow and fatness, and my mouth offers praises with joyful lips. Joyful worship. Praises to God. Heartfelt praises to God. So the result of a heart that is delighting in God is natural. It's worship. And a heart that is delighting in God will want to listen to God and His Word. Will want to listen to God. They have a heartfelt desire to listen to His words. Look at verse 6, and we'll see that. When I remember you on my bed, I meditate on you in the night watches. For you have been my help, and in the shadow of your wings I sing for joy. Again, you see the worship aspect, but you see this worship in the idea that I want to be close to you, I want to hear your words, and I don't know about you, but I like sleep. I like getting a good night's sleep. It's important. But David here is saying, I'll even give up sleep because I want to be with you. I meditate on you in the night watches. And he has this desire to do that. It's not born out of anything but heartfelt desire. I meditate on you. I'm listening to your words because I delight in you. I meditate on you in the night watches. For you have been my help, and in the shadow of your wings I sing for joy. My soul clings to you. We see another result there of a heart that delights in God. My soul clings to you. I want to be close to you. I want to be a part of you. I don't ever want to leave your side. I'm just stuck to you, God, as close as I can be. Why? Because I delight in you. You bring me the greatest and deepest satisfaction. Your love is greater than life itself. And so we see this, the results of delighting in God, the results that we need in our lives. I want to worship you. I want to listen to you. I want to stay as close to you as I can. I don't want to follow the path of sin anymore. See, that's why it's so important that we learn to delight in Him. I don't want to follow the path of sin anymore. I don't want to follow the deceitful pleasures of sin anymore, because I've seen you and I know what you mean to me. And so I'll give all of those things up for you, God. Not out of commands, not out of merely duty, but out of love and desire and joy for Him. Well, what if you're sitting here this morning, as I have many times in my life, and you say, I used to delight in God, but honestly, if I'm honest with myself, I'm just not feeling it. I don't have that desire. I don't have that delight. Something has changed in my life. But I hope that you're saying, how do I get that back? Because, God, I want you. I want to desire you more than anything else. And I think God can work with that. When He sees our hearts and He sees us say, I've fallen from this. I I'm not where I used to be, but I want to get back there. I want to make you everything in my life, God. God can work with that. I want to point out here, though, there is a danger here that we need to talk about. There is some balance that we need to bring to the table. And that is that I don't want you to base your relationship with God merely on feelings. I mean, these feelings of delight and joy are so important for us. But to base your walk with God completely on that can be dangerous, because you're saying, well, I'm not feeling it. I guess I'm not a real Christian. I guess I'll just give up. We don't want to do that. That's not the purpose of this message today. And I want us to see that we have to trust in the promises of God, even when we're not feeling it. He is faithful. His promises still stand, even if we're not feeling this delight. Maybe we have a bad day or a bad week and we're struggling. Hey, the promises of God haven't changed, but He still wants us to delight in Him and to come back to that. But don't let these feelings that we sometimes have deceive your heart and make you think, well, I'm not really right with God. God's promises have changed. I'm not really a Christian because I am struggling with having this delight in my life. But nevertheless, because of the reasons we've just seen, it's important that we learn to renew our delight in Him. So how? How can we do that? I feel like I'm in such a rut. I feel like I just don't have this outpouring of love and emotion and satisfaction for God. How can I get it back? I'm going to offer to you 3 suggestions. Number 1, how can I get my delight back? Ask. Ask God. I think that His heart is moved when we come to Him and ask Him and say, I want you to be everything to me again. I want to get back there. Just ask Him. 1 John chapter 5, verses 14 and 15 says that if we ask anything according to His will, He hears us. Is this according to His will, that He would be everything to us? We could just ask, and not just once and not just flippantly, but persistently to ask Him, Lord, I want you to be everything in my life again. And He can lead us into that. I want you. Help me to desire you more than anything else in this world. Ask. Number 2, how can we get our delight and our desire and our fire for God back? Draw near to God. Draw near to God, even if you're not feeling it, right? We don't want to base everything on our feelings. And I don't want you to say, well, I'm not feeling it, so I'm just going to go the other direction. No, that's not what we want to do. We want to draw near to God. I'm reminded of the passage in James chapter 4 and verse 8. Draw near to God, and what? He will draw near to you. Have you ever thought about what that means? I mean, deeply? What does it mean that God will draw near to me? Will the presence of God change things in my life? Will the presence of God, as He sees my response, He sees me drawing near to Him, now He starts moving to me. He starts walking toward me. The Almighty God moving in your direction, will that change anything in your life? I mean, we have to believe, again, not basing everything on feelings. We have to believe this is a promise of God. He said, I will draw near to you. We have to believe that and see that through the eyes of faith. But what I'm asking you is, don't you think the Almighty God moving in your direction will change things in your life? Will we have a sense of delight as He moves nearer to us? And as we, I'm not feeling it, but I want to move. I want to make a move toward God. Don't you think He can increase our sense of satisfaction and joy and delight in Him? Don't we think that as He draws near to us, that maybe He would give us a sense of His presence, of His peace, that, as we read earlier, that His consolations will delight my soul as he moves nearer to us? But he's looking for a response from us. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. So let's take steps. If we want to get our delight and our joy and our satisfaction, our fire back in God, we need to start making moves toward him so that he will move back toward us. And how do we do that? It comes back, I don't know how many times I've said this from this pulpit, and I haven't been here very long. Prayer, study, and worship. Prayer, study, and worship. I'd like to offer to you a suggestion that I wish I had known all of my Christian life. Before you read and study, pray. Pray that God, through his Spirit, would open up your eyes to his word, that you would be able to see wonderful things in his word. Is that according to God's will? Will he answer that prayer? And as he opens our eyes and we begin to see wonderful things from his word, what's going to happen to our level of delight in him? Oh, he becomes more and more precious to me. As I take the time and I move toward him and I begin searching and studying his word, he moves closer to me. Before you study and before you read, pray that God would open your eyes and your heart. And not just read and study and these things, but to act on the things that you read, to live the things that you read, to take small steps toward him or big steps in obedience. We need to be worshiping together. That's how we draw near to God. We worship, we gather with the saints, we pour out our hearts in praise to him. And I would also like to encourage you to have personal devotion time, just you and God. I'm not saying instead of the assembly, but in addition to the assembly with the saints. Have personal devotion time with God. And you sing praises to God, like the psalmist said. I delight in you, and my lips just overflow with praise toward you. Sing to God. And you say, I'm not a very good singer. Well, that's okay, because you're going to go off by yourself where nobody can hear you. And pour out your heart to God. And study his word. And pray as you study his word. And you're having this conversation with God. And as you take steps toward God, God takes steps toward you. And he can increase our delight and our joy and our satisfaction in him. But personal devotion time is so important. Assembling with the saints on the first day of the week, so important for us to, I'm reminded of the psalm that says, oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. But you have to taste of him to see that he's good. You have to be in him. You have to be with him. You have to be developing that relationship with him. And you say, oh, he is good. And that delight grows and it grows as we spend time with him. So ask, draw near to God, and to renew our desire for him. I was thinking this is important as well. We need to realize in our hearts that God is a personal being. He, for lack of a better term, he's a person. He's a being. Sometimes we look at God as merely one who gives us a code. He's merely a lawgiver. He's merely one who gives us a list of what to do and what not to do. God is much more than that. He is a person, a being, not like we're a person, but he's a being who desires a relationship with you. God has a mind. God has a heart. God takes pleasure in us taking pleasure in him, if that makes sense. And to start to see him as not, my relationship with him is not just box checking. It's not just, well, I've done my duty and I check it off the list. No, he is my Father. I want a relationship with him. And I think as we start to see that, our delight and our joy in Him will continually grow and grow over time. Renew your delight in God. It's so critical. It's so important. And this last point here on the screen, Allison was looking at this, and I was, and thought, I don't know if that makes sense, but I'm going to try to help you make sense of this. God delights in our delight, in our delight in Him. God takes pleasure in us delighting in Him. And I think that's important to understand. God, we might put it this way, God is glorified when we delight in Him. God delights in us finding satisfaction in Him. I'm thinking of Noah when he gets off the ark, and what does he do? He offers up a sacrifice to God. Not commanded. God didn't tell him to do this. But out of a thankful heart, out of delight for God, he offers up this sacrifice. And what does God do? He smells it, and it's a soothing and a pleasing aroma to Him. God delights in the delight that Noah gave to God. Psalm 147, verse 11 says this, "The Lord takes pleasure. The Lord takes pleasure in those who fear Him, on those who hope in His steadfast love." So God is getting pleasure from us worshiping and adoring and praising Him. I'd like to give you an illustration before we close. This is not an illustration that's original that I thought up, but I thought it really captures this idea that we need to move beyond command and merely duty, and we need to also learn to delight. Delight in Him. So imagine that it's Father's Day, and you go to your father, and you've picked out this gift, and you've taken the time to find a gift that he would like, and you come to his house and you say to him, "Dad, I got you this gift, and why don't we go out to lunch because I want to spend time with you?" And your father says, "Oh, that is so kind of you, and this is a wonderful gift." He says, "Why did you go through all this trouble to do this for me?" And what if you said, "Because you commanded me to"? What if you said, "Well, I read on the internet that this is what kids are supposed to do for their father. So I'm checking the box, I've done my obligation, here you go"? What would your father think of that? Maybe he'd think, "Well, my kid is not quite right in the head." Maybe he would think, "Something's not right here." I mean, that doesn't do much for you, does it? That doesn't give you a lot of joy for your child to say, "I'm doing this because you commanded me to." That's how we treat God sometimes. I've done my obligation, I've checked the box, I went to worship, I sang the songs, and now I'm out the door. Does God take any pleasure in that? I think it's good that we're trying to make moves toward Him, but I want us to grow beyond that. So imagine the analogy, the illustration in another way. You go to your father, you've picked out a gift for him. You say, I want to go to lunch, I want to spend time with you. He says, "Why? Why did you go through all this trouble?" And what if you said, "Because I delight in you. Because I love you. Because I want to spend time with you. And you're everything to me." What would that do to your heart as a parent? To see your children cherishing and honoring and just enjoying your presence. That's what God sees in us. I'm not here because I have to be here. I'm not following you merely because it's a duty or a command or a habit or an empty ritual. No, I'm following you because I delight in you. I love you and you mean everything to me. That's where we need to get in our lives. And I hope this sermon has been helpful to you in helping us to get back there if we've fallen away from that. And we have so much to delight in as Christians, don't we? Jesus Christ, who gave His only Son for us. that we could be with Him, that He would be our Father, that God would be our Father, that He would care for us. We could have a relationship as His adopted children. Our sins could be wiped away. All of this through Jesus Christ. Do we have a lot to delight in? Do we have a lot to be joyful and be thankful for? I pray that we would this morning be thankful to Him, learn to delight in Him. If you're here this morning and you need prayers of the congregation, we would love to pray with you. If you would like to learn more about becoming a Christian and putting on Christ in baptism, we would love to study with you. We would love to talk with you. If you have any need, please feel free to come forward while we stand and while we sing.